Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. Before we get to our next guest, though, let's take a look at the four major indices because they are far off of session lows, getting closer to unchanged territory. The S&P 500 down only 0.1%. Dow Jones Industrial Average only off about 81 points as we speak. The NASDAQ 100, the tech space, only down 0.25% now. And the Russell was just in the green on the flat line now as small caps make a comeback with the overall market. So some pretty good strength here, some added volatility, some whipsaw that Kevin and I expected going into the end of the quarter. But let's bring in our next guest, and that's for our cash tag segment. And that's Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so we're talking Shopify. Shares are down about 77% so far this year. All-time highs in November, split adjusted. They just split their stock 10 for 1. All-time high 176 last November. But this has been just like a lot of stocks that don't make money, Andy, at this point, been in a downtrend. What kind of data are you seeing? Because we're seeing some weakness in the consumer in the States. What are you seeing as far as sentiment data out of the consumer for Shopify?
Yeah, I think this is one of those companies I would classify as, a real game changer, innovator, disruptor, best of breed. It's got all of the kind of qualities that, from a long-term perspective, LikeFolio really loves to see. People love using this product, and it's completely in a class of its own. When you compare Shopify versus what I guess you could call its competitors, Etsy, Amazon, eBay, put those on a little bit of a scatter plot, and we see Shopify in that golden range at the top right corner of this scatter plot. And what that tells us is this is a company that's seeing, it's further to the right than its competitors because it's got outpaced consumer demand growth than its competitors. It's further up on the chart because its consumers like it more than its competitors. It's exactly where you want to be. And, this is one that I think it's pretty rare for me to come on this show and, kind of pound the table and say, look, if you're interested in technology over the next decade at all, or e-commerce over the next decade at all, this is one that has to be on your watch list, especially down as much as it is. The stock has been absolutely beaten down. They did a 10 for 1 stock split, and then the stock almost 10 for 1 split without the split. It's moved down that much. And when we look at where the stock is, it's below those March 2020 lows, absolutely hammered. I feel like this is one of those babies thrown out with the bathwater that you really have to pay attention to, because when we look at consumer demand and usage of this product and this platform, as you can see on this chart, we're back to approaching all-time highs. And again, best of breed company, beaten down with the overall market. I think this is one that investors, especially if you're thinking long term and you can handle some volatility, really have to be paying attention to.
Andy, this is one of those names, and you buried my lead on the baby in the bathwater. Come on. When you look at a company like this is one of those names, because of their valuations, because of they're in that pile of growth stocks, they got punished during this period. And some of their valuations, frankly, if you look at it purely on valuation, is still very pricey. It's higher than a lot of the peers in its group. But the one that jumps out at me is the price to forward sales. And that's only 8 times price to forward sales. And that one tells you that it's reasonable, because that means sales are growing to make this valuation better and better and better as time passes, Andy. You guys, come on. You can't get, in terms of LikeFolio's measure of a company's value and their popularity, you can't get more top right than this one on your chart. You've taught us that top is good and right is good. Well, the only further you can go is out of the box, right, for this. So this is just one of those one. And by the way, for our viewers, it's a $32 stock. It's not like it's 400 or 500 or 1400. This is now a stock that is reasonably priced for a retail investor to wait this out. So not that I'm not allowed to recommend anything, but certainly looking at this company's growth prospects, I've never heard you come on and say as positive as you're talking right now. Just keep going, Andy, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, look, the stock's down. It was 176. Now it's 31 or 32. Yes. Right. Could it go to 20? Could it go to 15? We never know. You know, like Kevin, you say all the time, no one rings a bell at the bottom. You know, but this is one of those companies where I think if you're patient and if you're thinking, I'm looking for those companies that have the best chance to come out of this stronger on the other side, like we saw with Amazon in the early 2000s, like we saw with Microsoft not too long ago, like we saw with Netflix and Tesla not too long ago. You know, those kind of companies don't come around too often, and I think Shopify does fall into that category of a game-changing company that changes the way people buy goods and services, changes the way brands go to market. And so when you've got a company like that, this beaten down, you know, I like to think of it as opportunity rather than worrying too much about how fearful Wall Street's going to be tomorrow. I like to focus on how good will this company be 2 or 3 years from now. And all indications that we have is that this is going to continue to be a great company that changes the way people do business across the world.
Yeah, Andy, and I was looking at the consumer purchase intent mentions chart on that, and that continues to move a little bit higher after a little bit of a dip. But when you have the economic environment that we're in right now, where the consumer is getting stretched as far as how far their dollar goes, fuel prices, inflationary risks out there. We've seen some of the pullbacks in a lot of stocks right now, especially in the retail space, where they're not meeting expectations as margin shrinks. And you've got that environment where central banks are raising interest rates around the world. It's getting higher cost to borrow for a lot of these startups like this. So is this more reflective of the people that want to buy stuff from these small businesses, because this is an outlet for a lot of those small businesses? Will this take time maybe to reverse if the consumer continues to pull back on spending, where maybe the near-term data might flip soon?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. I do think that there are very real reasons, you know, to think that Shopify isn't what it was 6 months ago, primarily because money isn't as cheap and this company burns quite a bit. But I will say that technology led this downdraft in the market by a sizable margin, and I think it will be one that leads the rebound. I think that this sector, the tech sector, some of these beaten down kind of Cathie Wood type of names will probably be the first to come out of this, and especially those that are best of breed, which is a category that I would put Shopify in. So I think all of the concerns are very legitimate. This company, you know, has a long way to go, but the stock has come down so much at this point that it feels like, you know, how much more negativity can really get priced into one of these best of breed type of companies.
Yeah, and they don't report earnings till the 27th of July, so we've got a few weeks on that. But if you did have an earnings score on Shopify based on this data that looks pretty positive, what would it be?
Yeah, we would be at plus 37, which is moderately bullish and climbing pretty much every day.
Yeah, and you got to remember, you know, investors, I like your angle here, Andy, where you're looking more long-term for the prospects for this company as we get through maybe some recessionary periods in the near term. Remember, Amazon, you know, basically traded flat and was losing money for years before they became profitable and sustainable at that point. So maybe a good comparison there in the early growth aspects of Shopify. All right, Andy, good stuff as always. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right, that's Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data on Shopify.